So one last thing that I'm going to touch on will be how do we get some reflective surfaces from Clarice as renders that work with our DMP and into Nuke. Because while in this shot there will be not much parallax which would give us a lot of interesting reflection movements and things like that, in your shot that might not be the case and you might want to have some of that included, so we're just going to quickly look at that. So first of all, let's duplicate our DMP base, and I'm going to call this DMP, or no, not even. I'm just going to call this reflective surfaces, and what I'm going to do is combine what we had done earlier to have the upwards looking faces have the texture of water, or the material of water as well as the water itself, and also we're going to add some realistic gold material to all of these domes, and then using masks we can multiply these reflective renders with our DMP to add that slight little bit of energy into the shot and have it have real reflections. So we'll want to go into our shaders, and I'll create a new one and call it reflective, and I'll create a new shading layer, reflective SL, and here to the reflective surfaces I'm going to disable the override material and click to use our reflective SL. Actually, let's put the shading layer into the shading layers folder just to be a little bit more neat. But it's still connected in our render layer. So non-reflective, let's create a new material physical standard. And we're going to change the Fresnel to water and copy this, and for the copy we're going to change it to gold. So we're going to say gold standard gold standard and water standard, and let's just find our shading layer and open this up. Here what I'm going to do is, first I'll select the temples, and I'll use my gold standard, and now we see all of the temples are gold, and for everything else I'm quickly gonna, I'll plug in my water standard. And let's turn off the 3D view and split this and create a material editor. And let's throw in the gold standard. And another thing I'm going to throw in there will be my DMP base matte. Okay, so we have this. And let's create a multi-blend. So we want material physical multi-blend. And into layer 1 we're going to plug in our gold. And into layer 2 we cannot plug in our matte material because it's not physical. So instead we're going to circumvent this by creating an emitter material which is physical and just connecting our DMP base projection setup to the color of this. And let's put this into layer 2. Okay. And if I change this to, Let's bring everything back. Or have I put my multi-blend? Let's throw the multi-blend into our reflective folder. And we're going to call this gold multi-blend. And let's just change this gold standard to the gold multi-blend. And currently these two are not blending correctly. So what we need to do is we need to create a mask to separate where they appear. Because, okay, let me zoom in on the temples, just on this one. We are getting our gold, half mixing, half not mixing with this DMP, but it is not masked in any way. What I want is for the top or upwards looking faces to be gold and then the rest to not be, and then we'll multiply that with Nuke with our DMP ourselves. So let's just create a normal map, texture normal map, and let's create a reorder node. And in the reorder we want everything to be green, which is the normals facing up. Okay, and if I plug this in as the weight for layer 1 and texture invert, plug in as weight for layer 2, and so we are getting a nice mix of gold at the top and DMP on the walls, but I also want to maybe remap this normal map just so we get more of that upwards facing mask showing. So we're gonna do maybe this much. Okay, so now our golden domes are golden, and literally, I guess, with the proper material, unlike earlier, and the walls are just the same old DMP walls, but because we have this material, the DMP material here, it reflects off of the gold surfaces, and the two blend together realistically. If we had just done this with a normal shader instead of our DMP, we still would have got reflections, but they wouldn't have been accurate to the colors of our matte painting. So now that we've done this, let's copy this multi-blend and let's call this water multi-blend and select it here. So now, before we have changed anything, everything has the same properties now of the gold being applied to the tops, but instead of gold standard here, we want to plug in our water standard. And I think here we can do without the remap. Oh, can't see anything. Okay. So now we are getting gold on the tops of all our temples and water on all of the upwards facing faces. Let's have another look at this water standard material. I think we can get slightly better results if we change the diffuse front color just to black. And this, I think, will allow us to multiply the reflections better with our DMP in Nuke by just having the default value be black, and then the reflections will show through better. And yeah, for the transmission strength, let's just have it at 0. And so now we have this reflective surfaces render pass, and it looks quite cool. And we're going to render out a full sequence of this. This will take quite a while to render because it will have to compute all of those reflections, which has not been necessary for all of our DMP passes, but it'll be worth it, I think. In addition to this, I think we can also, maybe let's duplicate this And I'm just going to change out the shading layer, and I'm going to call this reflective, or no, maybe gold alpha shading layer 1, or just shading layer rather. And let's plug this in here. And let's select it and let's have a look. I think here we'll want everything but the temples to be black. And for the temples, let's create a new material matte, and we're going to call this gold alpha matte. And let's bring back the material editor just for a little bit more. Let's take our gold multi-blend here. And let's plug in our reordered normal map with all the faces pointing up into the color. And here for the temples, let's select the gold alpha matte. So now we have a matte of all of our temples upwards facing normals. So what we will be able to do with this is isolate these domes, and we'll have to do a little bit of manual work just to kind of maybe cut them out from the rest of the temple, but because the shot doesn't move that much, it won't be too much of a problem. The only way we could have avoided this is if we, I guess, did our geo with more care to split these out into separate groups. But we didn't, and it'll take a little bit of extra time to fix this, but it's not going to be a big problem. So let's call this gold alpha. And let's pause this. Oh, it's not the pause button. Pause it here. Okay. So now that we have this done, we have pretty much everything that we're going to need. So I think one more thing to mention is how to actually render all of these passes out. And what we'll want to do is, let's pause that. Just enable all of the ones that we are going to want to render. And there are quite a lot now. I think, okay, we don't need this one. Yep. Okay, and now that they are enabled, we can go to Windows Render Manager and scroll down to our image sequence. And here we can see all of them ticked and ready to be rendered. Be aware if a render pass is ticked here, but not enabled to be viewed here, it will just render an empty image, so always watch out for that. And we can see that the frame range for all of these is set from 1 to 50. And if we go into each individual render layer, what we can do is, if we scroll up, go to our frame range and change this to whatever we want. Frame step is basically, does it skip any frames? So if it's 1, it renders every 1 frame. If it's 2, it renders every other frame. If it's 3, it renders every third frame, and so on. And if we click render to disk at file output and select the destination and make sure to put in 2 hashtags before our file format, this will identify each image with the frame number that it is. And we enter these settings, and once we have that done, and remember we can do these together for all of them, so I have 5 render passes selected and I can change the frame ranges for all of them, so it's a nice little shortcut. But once we have all of that, we can just click here to render, and Clarice will start rendering all of these, and we can pick them up once they're done and bring them into Nuke. So one more kind of piece of advice I would give is that, for example, some of these don't need to be rendered at full resolution. For example, for our God rays, as well as our, where are they, VDB fog. We can drop the resolution down to maybe half. So let's just copy and paste this image sequence. So let's click Ctrl C and Ctrl V. And let's just rename this image sequence half res. And what we're going to do is select most of these and delete them. Okay. And if we play here, let's just disable this for now. And yes, also remember to enable anything that you've disabled. So I've disabled a lot of stuff here earlier. Okay, so now we have these two layers in a half-res image, and what we can do is just drop the resolution multiplier down to 50%. And because these will be on at such a low opacity in Nuke, I think we can get away with just having these be rendered at half resolution, which would be 2000 by 1000 pixels. And yeah, with that, I think with your decisions made regarding which of these you want and what resolution you want to render them at, feel free to click render, and we're gonna jump into Nuke and start compositing everything together. Cool.